Hi, Cody.
Hey, Josh.
I'm excited to chat with you today. I liked you the second I met you. And I think it's because you are so kind and you're fun and you're funny and you exude all of that pretty much immediately. There's like some folks that you meet and some of those things are reserved and you kind of have to dig them out of them after a while. But I feel like meeting you, you were so upfront with who you are and how bright your personality is that being around you just made me feel comfortable. And you're somebody that I like to spend time with and to crack jokes with. And now I'm really fortunate that we get to sit here and have this conversation and learn a little bit more about your story. So thanks for sharing time with me today, Cody.
Wow, yeah. Thank you for saying that. That's really nice. I've pretty much looked up to you since the moment I met you. So that's really nice to hear, and I'm honored and stoked to be here. Honestly.
Where did you begin with hospitality?
Most of my youth, my dad was he managed a local burger joint called the Loop. So I started bussing tables there at the age of 14. Um, Got my first like server job when I was 18. I worked at a hookah lounge for several years. Wanted to work with liquor. Wanted to be a bartender. Pretty early on, I knew that for whatever reason that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up bar backing at a place called Dos Gatos, coming up the ranks there, all the way into now where I'm managing a couple bars. So started at the bottom and kind of rose my way up.
What kept you in it? What do you like about the service industry?
Uh, I love the concept of hospitality, of inviting someone into my space, and making it so that we're both at home in that space. Um, I think I always love talking to people and connecting with people, making people smile and laugh and have a good time has always been super important to me. So, um, I remember early when I was young, we'd go out to dinner, and my mom would, meet a bartender. She'd say, you'd be a good bartender. You should bartend through college, or you should bartend and make some money while you're in school. So I did, and then the school kind of fell to the background, and the bartending became the focus. So I don't know if that's what she had in mind, but I think they're happy with where I'm at now.
Why do you think that is? Why was it something that kind of demanded your focus?
Well, again, the opportunity to connect with people, um, and frankly, I wasn't very, I was good at school up to a certain point. When I got to college, it was kind of like an opportunity to let my hair down when I had it. I went full party boy. I got to UCF, University of Central Florida, when I was 17 years old. And it was my first opportunity to really be unhindered, no parental supervision, no nothing. So I got after it, and had the full college experience aside from, going to classes, doing homework. That wasn't my deal. At first, I kind of got into the service industry because it was really my only option at that point. And it was again one of those things. I came back from UCF, back to Jacksonville, and enrolled in the community college here, and got a job at the hookah lounge. And like I said, the community college kind of waned away after a couple semesters, and um, the hospitality industry became my new norm, my new thing that I kind of just like latched onto.
Did you continue that party boy lifestyle?
Yeah, forever. For probably close to 15 years after that, I kept it going in one way or another. You know, it went into my 20s when I got my first bar back gig. I just got after it like I think a lot of us do. I was working every night that I could, and we were drinking at work, and then we would, you got a nice buzz after work. You go somebody's house, and you're doing it till 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. Go to bed, wake up, rinse, repeat. As I started to get more serious about bartending, um, we just kept drinking. It was part of the culture. When I started working at Dos Gatos, it was like really where I wanted to be for a long time. I wanted to make craft cocktails, and I wanted to learn the business and learn the industry. And we drank every night. We called Jaeger bombs our house red, and we had probably 5, 6 nicknames for a Jaeger bomb. And that was so it didn't sound so repetitive when we'd say, "Hey, you want another? Want another? You want another?" And by the end of the night, you'd be 8, 10 Jaegers deep, just kind of coasting. Um, so yeah, I definitely kept the party thing going, even when we got to the point where we weren't really partying, we were just working and drinking. You know, with the parties kind of mixed in here and there, but
Did
it
that
was
start to
definitely
feel different?
yeah. I don't know. I guess you lose that like the excitement of it, and it's just like kind of what we do now. You know what I mean? And it was like there was always like an excuse for another shot. I noticed, like, get to work, let's have a shot. A little hungover, let's have a shot. Hey, there's my friend just came to the bar. Let's have a shot with them. Hey, I've never met this guest before. Let's have a shot with them. And it was like we're just looking for excuses at this point. Um, and I don't know. That got it always had its toll on my health too, and I was always just kind of going back and forth between like drinking a lot and taking a break. Um, and then I'd come off that break and kind of like, okay, maybe we have like a little bit of a moderation thing going on now. And it'd come back around, you go back to drinking. You're like, okay, well, we're not going to drink at work. And it's like, okay, just one at work. And then next thing you know, it's a lot of like slippery slope stuff, and I would take months off, or I got up to a year a couple times. But it was always like I'm just taking a break. You know what I mean? And then it somehow always got back into it. And it wasn't until I was taking another break, and then I got to the point where one day I just told somebody like, because I always, people always want to know. You know what I mean? It's not that it's any of their business, but they always ask anyways. Like, oh, are you sober? You don't drink anymore? What's your deal? And I was always like, oh, I'm taking a break. Or like, I'm not drinking right now. And then one day I changed it to, well, I don't drink anymore. And that was like a huge shift for me. I always talk about that being like the day that I decided and kind of realized at the same time. It was like kind of a realization, kind of a decision that like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that was like a big day for me. And I haven't been a drinker since then.
Was
So,
that like a response that kind of caught you by surprise, or was that kind of like your line of thinking for a while?
no, it was very much like kind of spur of the moment that day. It had been something that I'd been battling with eternally for a long time, because so much when you ingrain yourself in this like in this industry, in this lifestyle, it becomes so much of like who you are and what you do. And there's a lot of like insecurity that I still carry. That you know, drinking was definitely a coping mechanism for stuff like that. Having to face those things head on still is like tough for me to deal with some days. It's like I said before we recorded is it's a little bit scary to talk about some of this stuff, because it's really like the insecurities and the things that I don't like about myself that I used to just have this total ability to ignore and wash away. And now we face those things head on every day, you know. I don't remember the question.
When you face those things, I mean, is it something that it's happening all at once, or does it feel like you have a little bit more control as far as like what holds precedence?
Oh yeah, I've definitely, not sobriety has given me the space to seek counseling and therapy, which in turn gave me the tools to understand and to deal with my feelings and emotions and all those things that I spent years stuffing down, you know. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely developed a lot of techniques and abilities to cope in healthy ways. You know what I mean? Which I think is what a lot of us are after when we seek sobriety, is like um, finding ways to fight the demons. You know what I mean? And live like a really, for me, it's always about like just being healthy. Physically, of course, but also like emotionally and financially. Struggled with all those things for years, because we're just partying. You know what I mean? It's like so easy to get wrapped up in the lifestyle and live day to day and week to week and not really think about like the future and the consequences. And I've
When you
seen
talk
so many.
about an internal struggle with it, what did that feel like? Were there conversations you were having with yourself, or just kind of like cyclical thoughts that you can remember?
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration, because the hardest thing that I've always struggled with is moderation. And, trying to moderate and then failing and then becoming frustrated with myself. That just came and went over and over again. I'd go out for a drink or two, and the next thing I know, it's morning and I'm hungover again. And I don't, I blacked out. I don't remember my night. And it's like, dude, how do we let this happen over and over again? And it felt like it felt like I didn't have any self control or like self discipline. Like I was just like completely, I just didn't have the ability to regulate myself. And as like an adult person, it felt ridiculous. It was embarrassing for me. Um, Embarrassing is a whole nother word that, comes to mind when I think about, um, you know, the kind of drinking that I did over long periods of time. I was a king of blacking out. Just could never seem to remember the next day what I did the night before. And there's so much for somebody who cares as much as I do about what other people think. It was just a nightmare every time, and I just got so tired of like the hangovers and the anxiety um, that again, I mean, it was just one of many breaks when I finally decided that like, okay, well, this isn't a break anymore. This is like, we don't drink anymore. Um,
How did you start to come out of that? Because I was also somebody that, took breaks, and then one that took. How do you work through that, and what did those like kind of first few months look and feel like for you?
so there was, I had taken a break for a while, and then I started drinking again. And at the time, this was about like 3 years ago, um, that I was drinking at work, and this was when I was managing birdies. So I'm the big boss at this point. I'm a general manager. There's nobody to tell me about myself. It's just kind of going unchecked. And one day, a girl named Courtney. She's now my bar manager. At the time, she was one of our bartenders. She's also one of my best friends. She pulled me aside on a night that I was just kind of out and about drinking. I was at my bar, off of work, intoxicated, which is always a recipe for success. And she pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, listen, I don't know how to tell you this, but like your your drinking and the way you're acting is like starting to affect the way people are looking at you, like your staff. In so many words, that's what she told me. And as a leader, I was I was embarrassed and I was like kind of devastated. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of us kind of find ourselves in this kind of twilight zone where you don't really recognize how you're being perceived or how you're affecting other people. And I definitely didn't. I thought that everything was good and I'm having a good time and they're having a good time and but there wasn't. There was a lack of structure and a lack of leadership and leading by example. And that hit me really, really hard, So it was that day that I was like, okay, we're gonna take another break, but that was like the turning point, and that was when I started to think about like, okay, maybe it's not a break, and it was just a few months into that break when I like I said, I changed the way I verbalized it and the way I thought about it. And I will say that wasn't the last time I drank. Probably 6-ish months later, I was in Amsterdam for my brother's birthday, and it was Amsterdam, and I'm with friends, and I was like, let me just have one more last hoorah, and I did, and it was fun. The hangover the next day was one of many reminders for why I had stopped in the first place. But one of the things that was important about that trip is that I let myself continue my streak. Like, I didn't say, okay, the streak's over, because I knew that right where I was in that moment, even though it's just words. Where I was in that moment was like, okay, well, I'm gonna get home and spiral if I go home and admit to myself and everybody else that the streak is over. So while I acknowledge that I got hammered in Amsterdam, I decided to just like think of it as a one-off and let my streak continue, just for my own like headspace, and that like weirdly helped me a lot. And it wasn't until I got to like a new 1 year that I was like, all right, we can acknowledge Amsterdam now. Like, it happened. We're moving the date up because, like, again, I felt comfortable in where I was at that point. Um, so that's always been like something that stuck with me as what was important to me at that time to keep going, was like allowing myself that grace. And at the same time, I wasn't running around like yelling, "It's been so many days since my last drink," because there's a difference between like fibbing with yourself in order to help yourself keep going, and then just like generally lying to everybody around you. You know what I mean? And I wanted to keep my morale up while not like just misrepresenting myself. So it was a long time before I even started talking about sobriety, like publicly, because of that. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm fine with what I'm doing, but I don't really feel like a good example just yet at that point. Um, but it wasn't, 2 years, really 2 years was when I was like, okay, well, I want to tell people about this, because, there are people in my life whose sobriety were like a role model to me. You're one of them. Meeting you at camp and again in Portland, that was a lot. And hearing you speak about your sobriety, big deal for me. And the same with like Shannon and Nick, both really good friends of mine. And just having those people to like kind of lean on and just see that you're not like the only one. Obviously, there's millions of people living a sober lifestyle, but there's far fewer of us in this industry, and when it was hospitality is like everything to me, you know what I mean? Like the relationships I've built, and the fact, I mean, really, like, I joke about this, but it's very real that like if I didn't do this, I don't know exactly know what I would do. It's kind of like what I've gotten really good at this age in my life. So when I'm coming to those crossroads of like, can I even do what I want to do if I'm sober? Because frankly, like at that point, if the answer was no, like I wasn't even sure that I cared enough about sobriety to leave this industry. Like if it's this or that, I don't know what I would have done. So I'm really thankful for the people that showed me that there is space, and it's like a perfectly like fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. You know what I mean? Like I run two bars and I manage several drink menus, and it hasn't been a hindrance. So it's like I'm just glad that I was able to find that out. Because the way I was headed is just like not sustainable for a lot of us. I see a lot of my friends in the industry now, and I worry a lot about them. And I have several friends now that are sober, and looking at them and where they were at before, it's like I don't know if half of us would still be here. You know what I mean? If we hadn't made those decisions for ourselves. I worry a lot about. It's definitely like a tough industry to be in and see the way it affects people and try to have like a healthy relationship with it in a different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of those spaces where one thing is said and another thing is done.
Yes.
And, in those like party atmospheres, outside of those spaces, a lot of folks will talk to you one way and then you go and you see them like living another way. And it makes it difficult because it feels like you have to be that. And or you're not going to be welcomed into those rooms. Like if you're not part of like the big party atmosphere, that you're not going to be welcomed back, or all this thing that you like built up is going to start dwindling away because people are going to look at you different. Like I totally understand what you're saying, because while you are aware that there are, millions of sober people out there, when it's early for you, it feels like it's just you. Like you've never had to kind of like really, for most folks, never really had to sit for in that pressure of, can I continue this thing that I've been building? Because you equate your success and your personality to this thing that realistically has nothing to do with it. And when you're like looking at a future that looks less than through your like current lens, it makes it that much more difficult. And it's funny now to hear myself say that, because I was somebody who thought that, and now looking back, it's just like, you idiot. Like, how could you even think that all of this was tied to that? Like, you are so much more beyond that. But it's difficult because I had tethered so much of my personality to it. Everything that I did involved alcohol. Like, it didn't matter where or when or what time or what we were doing. Like, alcohol found a way into it because I thought it had to, because I looked around and that's what I saw in so many others. And, I was like, how can I up level what they're doing? Or like, how can I be a part of that? And then when I stripped it away, I was like, oh, did I just throw all of it away? But no, it sounds cheesy, but it feels like one of those like Phoenix moments. Cause like I came back so much better when I was able to finally tell myself, like, you did all of this not because of that. And now that it's gone, just watch what's possible. And it made me care so much more deeply about people. It made me care so much more deeply about my job and my techniques and me as a leader. Like, I didn't feel like I had this filter on of I'm just kind of like passing through. It's like I'm doing things with intention now, and I'm clear-headed enough to like actually put thought into all of these things. I do want to ask you, how did 2 years feel different than 1 year? Like, how did it feel when you were like, this is real, this is something that I'm doing, I'm not gonna start over again?
Well, it was super proud, just a really proud day for me, because I've never been a person to like focus on like big days like that. Like I can't tell you how long it's been since I smoked a cigarette. That was a big deal to me at one point, but that never had the hold on me that drinking did. 2 years was different in the way that Um, Again, it wasn't like, okay, well, it's been 2 years. Should I try it out again? It was like, yeah, we're here, and I can't wait for year three and year four. I can't wait to make another Facebook post and tell my friends that I did it again. You know what I mean? Like, um, just like huge feelings of pride. Sometimes when I do industry stuff, especially like camp or I had the opportunity to be a red coat at Tails last year. It feels, and I wonder if like you ever feel this way. It feels kind of like a cheat code when you know everybody else is like doing the same hard work that you are, but they're also hungover. And I'm just like, I show up early and I'm ready to go. Probably had breakfast. Woke up early, had a nice light sleep. I love those days. Those days make me feel really validated
Oh yeah.
in my decisions.
Yeah,
But
especially
yeah.
tails. I lead the run clubs. So,
Oh, really?
the folks that do come out for that, sometimes they had gone out the night before and they're all like, "Whoa, you ready to do this?" And I was like, "Oh, I already got coffee and I ran here." So,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm very ready.
Yeah.
Man, the people that do the run club hungover are a special kind of breed. Couldn't be me, but maybe I'll meet you out there one of these days.
We're doing
If
the
not,
walk club this year. So you can run
oh,
or walk.
now you're talking.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Yeah, grab a friend, grab a coffee, grab some miles.
That's cool. That's
Cody,
really
who grew out of this sobriety? What do you recognize in yourself that was different from the past life?
cool. I feel like I match my position now, if that makes sense.
Totally.
I don't know that anybody ever outgrows imposter syndrome or leaves that behind completely. But I feel like much less of an imposter, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I know that as a general manager and as a beverage director in my company, there's a lot of young bartenders that look up to me. Um, and that feels weird to say, but I observe it and it's true. And I used to not feel at all deserving of that, because I was such a mess behind the scenes. And I'm certainly not like a complete individual at this point. You know, like I said, those insecurities, they're still there, and I still work on them. But I feel like just a more like I feel like I know myself better, and that I'm not only capable of doing what I need to do to grow as a person, but I'm willing to identify those things. And I wasn't before. I was living with blinders on, and I happily, ignorance is bliss. And I was just having a good time and didn't care to think about health or finances or any of that stuff. And so now I feel like I'm doing the work that I needed to do. So that's the main difference. Is just I feel like I build days on top of days, and before it was like I'm just living day to day. Every day I wake up, kind of do the same thing, but it feels different because there's a new joke or a new this or new that. But it was really like every day was the same, and now I have you know real attainable goals that I'm after, and I'm trying to own a bar by 40, and I'm 36, and I feel like that's an attainable goal. Whereas before it was just a pipe dream that I had, and there were a lot of those. So that's the biggest difference for me. Is just feeling like I have some some control over my life, not just completely off the rails.
How do you have fun?
That's a good question. I feel like I do a lot more like introspective, like chill things. I like to build Legos. That's a starry night back there. Um, and I like to hang out with my dog here. There he is. That's Rocky.
Hi, Rocky.
I just started reading again, which is cool. I hadn't read in a long time, and my buddy was telling me about this book series he's reading called Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I'm obsessed with it now. And I hadn't read in so long, so that's been really cool. But I mean, I work a lot. Like, admittedly, I work a lot. But I do love my job, and that's not to say that like working all the time is healthy. I'm definitely like working on that like work life balance, you know. But I do love what I do and the bars that I work at and the people that work with me. So I do get a lot of joy out of that. It's kind of a lame answer to say work, but you know, it just is what it is.
No, we can stay on that for a minute. I mean, what does it feel like to be exhausted in the workplace now? You know, when we would work a lot and also drink, like we're carrying such an unnecessary load in every
Yeah.
single day and trying to first crawl our way out of that and then crawl through the toughness that is like an already exhilarating and, intense day of work. How's it feel to just kind of like be tired from being a human being that is working?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, because before it was like, okay, finally I'm off work, I can have a nice cold beer, you know. And for me, I realized that like that was just really like the ritual of that was what we're after, you know. And so I just kind of try to replace that with like a few minutes when I get home of just like quiet introspection. I have a really bad habit of like doom scrolling. So I've been trying to like kind of take myself out of that for the first 15 minutes when I get home and just like focus on Rocky here. Because I feel like if I can just take that 15 minutes to unplug and hang out and like just really like get up in my dog's face, um, that kind of helps me like make that transition from work to home and reset my brain for mellowing time, you know. Um, and that's still something I'm working on. You know, it's still kind of in its infancy of just me again identifying something that I view as like a problem or a shortfall in my life. Too much screen time, and trying and like I need to understand my brain needs to understand why it's a bad thing, right? So I had to identify that and then kind of help myself find a solution for that. You know what I mean? So again, something I'm working on is just trying to just be better about like staying in the moment and unplug from all the screens and my job. You know.
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of a lot of things that you have to like replace when you start to live a sober lifestyle, especially for us when it's ingrained, like you said, in every part of your life, and trying to kind of untangle in as many places as possible. So it's just been kind of an adventure in that regard.
How do you think you're viewed through your employees' eyes now?
Um, I like I've been at Birdies for 5 years, and probably 80% of them have been there that whole time. And I'm very proud of that number right there. I think that says a lot. I like to think that there's a mutual love and respect. Um, I'm single and I don't have kids, and I have a family, and I care deeply about my family, but I also feel those familial feelings toward our teams, and I understand that not everybody builds those kind of relationships at work, and not everybody has that kind of relationship with their work. But I like to think that a lot of them, share that love and respect and like kind of familial care and understanding. You know what I mean? That's more than anything as a manager. That's what I try to foster is just like a comfortable and safe feeling environment for everybody. And I just want everybody to feel that way around me at work and just in general. So I hope. I can't speak for them, but I certainly hope that that's how they feel.
How do you show yourself kindness?
Uh, that's a good question. Probably, you know, to answer truthfully, it's probably something I need to be better at. I don't know. I guess I've always been hard on myself in some ways, and always kind of feel like, I am a person that will hit a personal kind of goal and not give myself much time to cherish it. Generally, it's like, all right, let's move on to the next thing. And I rarely give myself the time to kind of savor it. So that's another thing that when I was going to therapy more regularly, that's something we talked about. Is like um, questioning negative thoughts about myself and trying to figure out how we got there and turn those into positive thoughts. Um, I guess I don't really have like a great answer for that, other than it's certainly something that I need to work on for myself.
I mean, that can be enough right now, especially if you're coming from being a person that would have never thought about being kind to yourself. Like sometimes kindness can just live in that recognition of, I could be kinder. That was a big recognition I had of myself. I kind of learned that I was affording all of this kindness to everybody around me and then not paying attention when I wasn't doing that in the slightest to myself. I would hear the way that I talked to and about people, and then I would start, when I started listening to like the internal thoughts, I was like, well, who's saying this? Like, why are you saying that about you? You live in this world the same as they do. Why aren't you giving yourself the same grace that everyone around you gets? I had to sit with that for a while because it was really tough, and I still catch myself, but I'm proud that I catch myself, because before I just let it happen, and you kind of get buried under those thoughts, especially when you don't think about who's saying them or why they're being said.
Yeah, just when I again first kind of had this conversation, like you said, it's. I guess I didn't realize that I was being so hard on myself until it was kind of pointed out to me, um, and it's one of those things uh, where I hadn't thought of it much until you just brought it up, and it's certainly something that comes and goes in my mindset of like, I would love to be kinder to myself and work on it for a little while, and it kind of falls out. And I guess that's why people continue going to therapy, uh, so reinforce those concepts. Um, but frankly, I'm thankful for you for asking the question because it's clearly like a kind of a blind spot for me that I could just thinking of it more would be a great first step, I think.
I mean,
Uh,
that's one thing that I've kind of learned through sobriety. Um, some of the tools and practice that I've learned in becoming a sober person, I've been applying to other parts of my life, which I didn't even think about it. It was like I was living as a sober person, but then acting different in the other parts of my life as if I didn't already have the tools to like deal with that. And, I wouldn't say that I am an all the time kind to myself person, but it does feel easier to be kind to myself now than it did like a couple years ago. And there's just something to be said of like the practice of that, like the practice of recognition. And just like, even with my sobriety in the early days, I had those thoughts of just like, is this something that a sober person would do? And then I would kind of process that and then act on it. And then eventually that like whole filtration system went away, where I was like, I'm making this decision. I am a sober person. I made this decision. So yeah, a sober person would do this thing because I'm doing it kind of
right.
thing. And the same is kind of applied in, those other areas where it's just something that I acknowledge, I practice, and then when I am unaware of it, it's either something that has become daily, or it requires me to kind of have that other like self check in again. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, the biggest lesson that I learned in sobriety is like my sobriety happened as a result of me taking inventory and stock of how I felt, and the recognition of, in this absence of alcohol, I feel different in a better way. And that's when I started kind of like applying those check-ins much more frequently. 'Cause it was like, like you were talking about earlier with just kind of like going in and doing the same thing at work all the time. Like life gets put on repeat, and no one is going to step in and be like, "Hey, you've reached a checkpoint. Time to look inward."
Right.
So you have to do that. And if you don't do that, then it can be easy to slip. And
Hmm.
there's, it's tougher to grow when you're focused on slipping or not slipping.
Right. Yeah, I hear that.
Cody, what do you love about yourself?
Um, I love my ability to connect with other people, and my kindness. Um, you know, all my life I've heard people say that kindness is weakness. And you hear that, and you see. Something I've noticed is that a lot of people, as they get older, they lose that. They lose their like kindness. They lose their empathy, um, and I just I consider it to be a great strength, and it's definitely the thing that I think that I love myself the most for. I don't understand. I don't. I can't tell you how many times somebody's told me I'm too nice in my life, and I really like. I used to take it personally, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. Like, am I too nice? But what it always comes down to, I always get to thinking like, well, how would I be less nice? What would that look like? And I've even like gone through phases where I'm like, I'm just gonna be a little bit of an asshole all the time, because that seems to work for some people. We all have friends, and like they're just kind of a dick all the time, and everybody's like, oh, that's so and so, that's them. But that doesn't work for me at all. I just am not a good all the time dick kind of a guy. And if I'm too nice, then I'm fine with it, because I wouldn't know how to be a different way. Um, you know, I don't know. I like nice people, and I think it's cool when people are nice. And I'm really happy that people think that about me. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
answer your question.
At camp, we called you a certified sweetie.
For the first session, or when I was news?
All of them.
Okay, that's very nice.
Once you
That's really
recognize a certified sweetie, they stay
Hey,
certified.
that's
You don't
really
have to reapply.
nice. That's
Thanks,
cool.
Cody.
I like hearing that. Camp is such a funny place. That was like so when I went to camp the first time, I was like 2 months sober, um, because I got into camp during COVID, or before COVID, I should say. And so my session was pushed forward however long, like 2 years or something like that. And obviously, a lot had changed between when I got into camp and when it was time to go. I mean, 2 months sober, I was freaking out. I was so nervous, and I felt like that nervousness was pretty obvious my first few days there. It definitely like manifested itself, to where like I wasn't going to campfires, because all you ever hear about campfires, like layback city, it's like Sodom and Gomorrah, like on Earth, like everything goes, and so I was like, well, I don't need to be down there, and finally kind of coaxed myself out of that, thankfully. Obviously had a great time, but it was like that was huge for me, honestly, to make it through camp, not drink at all, and just, I was able to connect with a lot of people and talk about my like new sobriety with a lot of people at camp, and I think you were one of them, and there were a couple other people that I got the chance to talk to during that time, and then just a couple months later was Portland, and I went to Portland for my first time, and still like super in my head about sobriety and you trying to go to all the different events and everybody's shit faced around you, even though like I will say they've done a great job of being more inclusive and having more options. But I don't think there's any way to make it not intimidating, unless somebody's just a sociopath, you know what I mean? Like, just like
Yeah, you can even put
unintimidated.
up all of the boundaries and be inclusive and have all of the options. People will find a way to
Right.
to get out of control.
Absolutely. Um, so, I was really, and I still am very thankful to to them for providing those spaces, you know what I mean? And really thankful to like every person that was part of both of those journeys, because like there wasn't a single person in all of that time that was critical of my choices or trying to shake me from those. You know what I mean? Which is what I'm most thankful for. Is both at camp and at Portland and even here at home. Everybody's always been supportive, and I hear people talk about having to find new friends and having to like set really intense boundaries with certain people. And I can totally like I could see that, I can imagine that, but I'm super thankful to not have had that experience.
Yeah.
And I think it just comes down to like, even in my like drunkest of days, I've always been me, and I've always tried my best to be genuine and develop genuine friendships. So I'm thankful that like the ones that I built even during that time have mostly stood strong. It's just about being respectful and respecting people's choices and boundaries, I think.
Yeah. I will say if there was ever anyone that did give me a hard time, like they're not in my life anymore. And
Fair.
maybe in the moment that probably would have hurt, but now you recognize it's all for the better.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, certainly all for the better. I think about my health a lot and how much better that is. Obviously you run a shitload. I feel like you're probably in the better health of your life. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, it's made doctor's appointments a lot different. Like I used to go in there and I was like, all right, what should I lie about? And now when I go in, I'm like, hey, I'm worried I'm not eating enough bananas. Can we look into that? Like, how do we fix this potassium? And I don't know. I'm just like so smug because they're always like, and how much do you drink a week? I'm like, none and never.
go circle that zero right there,
Yeah,
man.
make it as big as possible. You're gonna actually get a bigger marker if you could.
Yeah, I mean, speaking on health, when I guess it was like 2014, 2013, I found myself in the hospital, having been vomiting uncontrollably for a day and a half. Um, and it, took me a full 24 hours of vomiting to go see it, to go to an emergency room. When I got there, they found that my esophagus had an ulcer that had been bleeding for that entire time, and that's what I was vomiting. So, that was a big. It should. I mean, again, this was 2013, 12 years ago, so long before I decided to really be sober. But that day, they told me that I needed to be sober, and they were very intense about it, and they were like, "Oh, no more, never again," and took me like 8 or 10 months after that to be like, I feel good now. You know what I mean? And that was, I think, looking back, that was a big change. Was like a lot of the time I was taking breaks because I didn't feel good. Like either I had gotten bigger than I wanted to be, or like again my esophagus was bleeding to death. Things like that were like, okay, let's take a break. And then like, I'd lose 40 pounds or my esophagus would come back into health. And then you start to forget about those like what seemed like really important health reasons because they're gone, and I'm like, well, now I could probably just take it easy now. And then a few months later, I'm right back where I started, and a lot of times worse, you know. Um, so I guess looking back on it, it's like I was taking breaks for reasons, but like until I like really found the right reason and like the right kind of motivation, like it just always came back around, you know. Um, yeah, and I hadn't really thought about that for a long time. But that's just kind of the way it went for years and years, you know.
How's it feel to feel good?
It feels good to feel good. It feels good, man. You know, like there's still like stuff in my life and in my brain that I want to fix, you know, or improve. Because I'm not broken. There's nothing that needs to be fixed, but there are, you know, lots of areas for improvement always. But you know, it just feels surreal. I never thought that I would stop drinking. You know, I just like when I imagined being old, there was like a glass of whiskey right there with me. You know, and I mean that goes back to like the like when you're imagining quitting, there's just like this whole array of things that you feel like you're giving up. And one of them is like your image of yourself and your image of who you are going to be in the future. Um, so yeah, I mean, gosh, man, it just feels incredible to not wake up feeling like shit every day and to like to feel like in control. You know, even on my worst days, I feel like I'm in control. Um, and there's never like that day. And don't get me wrong, I've had a day where I'm like, man, it'd be fun to be shit faced right now. But you know, I've never had a day where like what I was dealing with was so hard that I felt like I needed to pick up a drink to make it better. You know, and that's the biggest thing for me is like feeling like I can handle all of my problems. Just raw dogging it with my brain and emotions, you know. That is just like the word that keeps coming back to me is proud, because I'm super proud. Just I've never seen myself as like someone with like incredible self like fortitude and discipline, and you know that's kind of what it takes to be able to like you know anybody can go a day or 2 days or 3 days and then like keep stacking those days and like keep improving as a person. I'm just there's no other word but like pride, you know. That's what I feel, you know.
I'm proud of you too, Cody.
Thanks, man. I'm proud of you.
Thanks for sharing your journey with me.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.